My name is BJ Quinton. I am the chair of the drone working group, and today we're going to be hearing about incorporating drones into wildlife management in Montana. So one thing I did want to mention real quick is if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A section. That's the best way that we'll be able to answer those for you. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Ty.
All right, thanks, BJ. Um, yeah, so we were asked to do this webinar, kind of summarize what we've been doing with drones in Montana, not just in fish, wildlife, and parks, but also we brought in Jason Hanlon, who's been working with the Nature Conservancy for many years and kind of moving things forward with using drones for wildlife work. So I'll kind of go over what's fish, wildlife, and parks, or what I and some of my colleagues have been doing within the agency. And then we'll, at the end, toward the end, we'll have Wesley Sarmento, who was our bear specialist on the Rocky Mountain front for many years, and started using drones, and recently gave a presentation on that. So we'll have him give a present on what he found with using drones for managing bear conflict. So yeah, just wanted to touch base on things. That the Wildlife Society Drone Working Group is what kind of brought us all together here today for this. And we just met at the 2024 Wildlife Society meeting in Baltimore and voted for some new officers that were listed over there. And basically, if you haven't gotten involved with us, if you're interested in using drones, our mission is working group is to provide information and support for professionally, ethically, and legally incorporating drones into natural resources and wildlife research, management, and conservation. And you can see our past chair, Rick Spalding, is on the call as well. And he has really kind of led the charge for a long time, pulling together stuff, keeping the group going, starting the group, keeping it going. And also maintains a literature database for us on drone use in wildlife research, management, and conservation, which is very handy. Good place to start if you're just diving into this. So yeah, one of the big things the working group tries to do is kind of we want to do the best we can to use drones professionally, incorporate them into the work people are doing, and use them properly and respectfully. And you may have noticed in the news the last couple of weeks here, if there's been drone sightings, reportings all over the East Coast and whatnot, and people are talking about we should shoot them down, and that is actually considered a terrorist act because drones are considered aircraft according to the Federal Aviation Administration. So not advisable. We'll see how that goes. But in general, if you get on YouTube, you can also see a lot of photographs or videos of people using drones and kind of harassing wildlife. Hopefully those aren't actually the biologists and the people that are supposed to be out there doing it. And it does take quite a bit of work and knowledge about the regulations and how and where you can use drones and what steps you need to take to do things legally and respectfully and also ethically. We don't want to be harassing the wildlife. So diving into that, just real quick, the working group in 2023 in Kentucky, we had a working group meeting workshop, and these are the participants of that workshop. Spent the whole day learning about drones and doing all that stuff. So hopefully everybody had fun. So you may see, if you were at that workshop, you may see some of the similar things here. I saw a hand raised. Can everybody see and hear me just fine? I'm gonna assume yes. There's a Q&A here. Yes, I can see and hear you. Thank you. All right, great. All right, so jumped ahead while I was doing that. Let me go back. All right. So yeah, so we've been incorporating drones into working with wildlife in Montana, basically using drones to kind of supplement the work, help us be more efficient, figure out if what situations drones are good for, are handy for using. So my name is Ty Smucker, in case I didn't already cover that, and I've been working for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for over 15 years. Most of that time I spent working with wolves, first as a technician and then as a wolf specialist on the Rocky Mountain front. Um, and I have had an interest in using drones for about the last 20 years. And when I first started getting interested in that, drones were in the millions of dollars to even think about putting telemetry or anything like that on a drone. And you wait a decade or decade and a half, and suddenly there's commercially available drones everywhere. You buy them at the gas station, for that matter. So yeah, we've been finally, drones, able to use drones for wildlife work. And we've been working with the agency, our aviation division, our chief pilot, Joe Ron, has been helping facilitate us purchasing and using drones and getting certified. And I actually am help coordinate our drone program and do offer trainings, help put on trainings and get people the trainings and the equipment they need and make sure they're aware of all the regulations and whatnot. So on that note, yeah, as wildlife professionals, we regularly collect data on the species that we're studying or managing. And some of that is animal locations, group size, reproduction, and survival. Do they have pups? Do they have young? All that stuff. And I'm going to come at this for a little bit from a wolf specialist perspective, but that data goes into the science and used our numbers of pups go into the pack sizes and all that stuff, and we use that to estimate populations and monitor populations through time. And part of that is capturing radio collaring. Back in not too long ago, radio collars are a new thing, and doing aerial surveys with aircraft were kind of a new thing, and that need to be tested out. And sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it fails. So part of the job of wildlife biologists is we're out there getting collars on critters. Um, radio telemetry is the common way we keep track of critters, and vehicles on foot, in the air. See if the animals are alive or dead, try and get counts on those critters. And this is along the Rocky Mountain front here. So aerial tracking, historically, it's one of the ways we keep track of some of the larger, wide-ranging critters out there that we study. It is inherently dangerous. It does, however, have the advantage of allowing people to search large areas. Aircraft can be expensive. Whether you can fly or not depends a lot on the weather, pilot availability. A lot of factors go in there, and there's a lot of safety considerations. And sometimes you fly and you see nothing, you see no wolves, it's somewhere. Maybe you hear the beep, maybe you don't, maybe there's a mortality. Other times, maybe you see one wolf, versus trying to, the objective is to get a count on those groups of animals. So yeah, flying has its advantages, and more recently, GPS collars and transmitters have come onto the scene and are very useful for giving us, if they work, give us a lot of data on animal locations and dispersal. As you can see up here on the top right or top left corner up there, the wolf dispersed from Montana way up into British Columbia, east of Ketchikan, Alaska, further north than the wolves that were reintroduced were caught from in Montana. So very nice to have if they work. Again, though, you do not get group size information generally, for the most part, from GPS collars. And then, as I was talking about earlier, drones kind of exploded onto the scene here. Thanks to some of the bigger companies that became cheaper and more advanced and lighter batteries that last longer. All those things helped move drones onto the marketplace and into the hands of people that can do lots of great things with them. Domestically produced drones have been more expensive. However, we're having to use them more and more now due to federal regulations and whatnot. So that's a new thing. We can talk about that a little later. There's been a lot of work kind of using drones or dipping our toes into using drones for various species. This is just a short list from a few years ago, actually. Um, so yeah, it's just they're becoming another tool in the toolbox, and that requires kind of making sure that they're a proper tool and using them, um, showing that they're effective and collecting the data we need to monitor those populations. So back in 2015, I knew a buddy who does social media stuff and has the drone, and we knew where a wolf den was, and we went out and flew this wolf den from a vantage point up the hill. We could see the drone, and we flew it in, and this is the breeding female came out to check us out. This is the first drone footage that we were aware of a wolf den and pups from a drone. Took a few minutes of searching. We kind of knew where the drone was, or where the den was, sorry. And the pups really didn't seem to mind. They were just out in the open playing, um, rolling around. I think they've got a bone down there. So yeah, and that gave us a pretty good count. We actually saw two other pups that aren't on the screen, tucked away in the pine trees. So that proved that that's an effective method to use. Most of the time in the past, when we wanted to count pups, we had to go in on the ground. The pups run and hide, and you climb into a log or a den. And I think there's a few pictures of biologists out there with their feet sticking out of a den hole, and hopefully somebody can yank them out when they're done. But it can be a little challenging. There's actually 6 pups in this picture, so using wolf drones to count wolf pups can reduce the amount of time it takes to get counts, and also the amount of disturbance. They really don't seem to mind the drone, just kind of look up at it. So yeah, so I managed to get myself a drone back in 2019 and get certified as a remote pilot with the FAA, thanks to working with our chief pilot. And the drone I first had is still in action out there on the Rocky Mountain front, and it costs less than a good pair of binoculars. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah, since we typically trap areas with wolves, try in the spring, trying not to travel too much on the ranches that or the federal lands that we're trapping on. And it's nice to be able to see ahead of time if we have any grizzly bears in our traps, or if the traps have been sprung. This trap here has not been sprung, and this one has been stepped on. The grizzly bear pad right next to the trap, so we missed the grizzly bear there, luckily. But yeah, it's very useful just to have a drone there to go search for things. The chance of seeing wolves with the drone without thermal, without telemetry, and all that is kind of opportunistic. However, if we can follow up on GPS locations and collars that are working, it does give us a little more. As I started using the drone more, started to become more and more aware of how great it would be to have telemetry on there and some thermal. But we had the drone, and we started using it for a bunch of different things. There's a 10-year moose study just wrapped up, and we did several opportunistically got the drone up in the sky and counted some moose calves, looked for whether or not they still had one calf with them, looking for confirming reproduction with the drone. Actually got a little closer with this moose cow and calves. They were trying to figure out, this collar wasn't actually working, so we're trying to figure out which moose this was. They wanted me to read the print on there, so there's something to be aware of, of disturbance. But then, consider that this is very close with the drone. Again, we had a private citizen come out and help with a sheep reproduction project. The drones, you can see animals are aware of the drone, but however, if you were in there on foot or had a helicopter flying there, it would be a whole lot more disturbance, most likely. So it's all kind of relative to the needs of the project, monitoring those critters. And again, here we see another bighorn sheep from the Little Belt Mountains in Montana. Still has a lamb with her, and she had an injury, probably potentially a mountain lion attack, but that's healing up. probably before she actually had the lamb. So it turned out it's very handy. Accessing sheep country can be quite challenging on foot or even with a helicopter, very dangerous. And then you're dropping down with a helicopter, you have quite a bit of disturbance. We also had some cases where we used the drones to assess whether or not pneumonia was in a herd of sheep. And unfortunately, this herd had pneumonia. The sheep on the bottom there, if you watch that sheep with the drone, it's coughing and then turns and coughs right on its lamb. And another minute later, the sheep adult ewe above it coughed on her lamb as well. And most of these sheep did not make it. So, but it's good to be able to confirm that. And we can tell that very little disturbance for these sheep. Also did some attempts to count mule deer. Mule deer didn't seem to mind very much. It was pretty close with this drone here. And they just looked at it and kept going about their business. We do elk, on the other hand, unlike mule deer, really don't seem to like drones very much. Of course, they also don't like helicopters flying over, or anybody out there on foot in vehicles. So they've known to take off. So we have been able to use these cameras or drones to classify elk. And here's a video of our attempts to haze a herd of elk that had been coming into some ranchers in August, coming into the ranchers' alfalfa fields at night. And we used the drones to chase them off. A lot of the ranchers along the Rocky Mountain front are actually getting their own drones. So we're kind of developing some protocols and permitting system for allowing people to use their drones to haze elk and get them out of their pastures. That's kind of in the works there. We also used drone this past year to help with an elk study over in far western Montana on the Montana-Idaho border, trying to locate collared cow elk. And the researchers at University of Montana using models to figure out when these cow elk look like they just had calves. And we go out there first thing in the morning as it's getting late and try and find the elk cow and calf. And I was able to find this calf within about 30 seconds, under a minute of launching the drone. We knew where the cow was. And the calf is in the clearing about 40 yards or so from the cow went into the forest there. And you can hopefully see the cow in the timber and the calf out in the open. And then we took a crew in there and collared that calf. Check out the chat. Okay. And that was pretty effective. Actually, I believe Shannon Finnegan just published a paper on using drones to help locate and go in and ground dart mule deer up in Alaska and Kodiak Island. So this has some potential. I know Wildlife Services is using drones and thermal to guide people into find feral pigs and take them out down the southeast as well. So where to go? Oop. All right. So then there's some potential for grizzly bears. I don't want to talk too much about grizzly bears since Wesley's going to talk about them, but we have used them. Use the drones to help locate bears. Got some video footage here we worked with Wildlife Services along the Rocky Mountain front. They went in there with the dogs to try and chase a bear away from a calving pasture. And you can see that grizzly bear is not real pleased with the dogs and also not happy about the drones. The drone. All right. Also use some of the drones to try and monitor. Hopefully this video is coming through. It's kind of pausing for me. Up on Freeze Out Lake is one of our main wetland areas, wildlife management areas in Montana. Tens of thousands of snow geese stop there, and we have some colonial nesting birds up there that use that as well. So we use the drone to kind of monitor those, go try and count nests, See here, it works pretty good. Pretty minimal disturbance from that. Also, use drones. People are using drones to count pelican colonies too. And then there's a lot of work right now using drones to monitor waterfowl, and that's being paid for by Ducks Unlimited and it's the other nonprofit works with ducks a lot. So, yeah, got some potential for that here. Also in Montana, we have harlequin ducks. So we flew the drone up to some of these mountain streams and found some harlequin duck broods up there late summer. Show that there's reproduction. All right. And I think I will stop there. Just a lot of people have been kind of helpful with Montana doing drone stuff. And if we have time, we can go into a little more. We did actually just purchase a drone system with radio telemetry, and we have more thermal drones now. Most of our grizzly bear folks have them now as well. So, but I'm going to stop there in the interest of time and pass it off to Jason Hanlon
Ty,
to
before we
talk.
do that, do you have time for a couple questions?
Yep, I think so. Go for it.
Okay, we had a couple of them rolling here. Um, how do you solve the problem of connectivity in terrain like steep canyons?
From you mean using the drones?
That's just what the question says. The problem of connectivity in steep
Oh, yeah, well,
terrain.
with the yeah. So that's one thing with drones so far, beyond visual line of sight is you can get permitted to fly drones beyond what you can see. Um, however, and they're starting to issue those more. We have a mapping consulting firm in Montana that got a waiver for and is able to fly beyond visual line of sight. But flying drones, you have to be able to see the drone at all times. And under the Part 107 regulations. So we can work around that, but for the most part, the best option for flying canyons, steep canyons, is to find a high point where you can look down the canyon and fly the drone down the canyon. So which still means you've got to hike up to those high spots. So you're not just riding around a truck all the time. So
All right. Do you think prey animals are more fearful of drones than predators, or is it about the same?
it's very interesting how the species that seem very sensitive to drones versus ones that don't. Sometimes they're like mule deer don't seem to care. Sheep don't seem to care, be bothered much by drones versus elk really don't like drones. Even just putting one up a mile away, somehow they see it and start running, which it can be to our advantage if we're trying to haze elk out away from people's crops. Grizzly bears really don't like drones. And another thing to be aware of is if you're flying private property, horses don't like drones much either. And we've had some interesting things with dude ranches in Montana where they try and get some cool footage of people on horses and look how much fun it is to ride a horse on this dude ranch, and then they fly a drone out there and the horses, they have a wreck. And yeah, horses are not fans of drones. Something to be aware of if you're gonna fly around.
All right. Now that we started answering them, I'm getting a lot more questions. So maybe we'll go ahead and move on, and then
Yeah,
mention before answering these later, maybe in a video that people can view or something like that.
that sounds good. Yep. We'll get Jason to, I'll stop sharing mine, see if Jason can share his screen. Oh, wow. There are a lot of questions. I'm going to mute myself.
Can everybody see my screen all right?
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's see here. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so my name is Jason Hamlin, and I'm the Northern Great Plains land steward, and I work for the Nature Conservancy, primarily out in eastern Montana. And I've been a certified drone pilot since 2017, doing some mapping work for TNC, and then moving into some wildlife monitoring as well. So today I'm going to talk about a project that we did in 2021 and 2022. Um, First of all, the project is on a little bit of a hold, so we don't have the analysis back yet on this. So I won't be going through too much of the analysis. But what I am going to talk about is I'm going to talk about using a drone with an infrared camera to count sage grouse leks. And this project was based on using fully autonomous methods. So pre-programmed flight, so programming a drone to do the flying, collecting a video, an infrared video, and then taking that video and analyzing it with machine learning algorithms. And then we also built the graphical user interface, which is like a one-stop location for housing the video, housing the analysis. And this was our kind of our first attempt at this. And it's actually really cool. It's really, really complicated. But with how quick technology is moving, I'm sure that there's a lot better tools out there even now, just a couple years later. Okay, hold on here. Okay, so first I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens when we pull up to a lek. And I'm going to talk about how we fly it. And then basically there's four counts that we kind of do. So we do a ground count. So we pull up to a lek. This is kind of how the project went. So we have a kind of a shortened version of the standard lek count. So instead of sitting there for 15 minutes, we usually count for 5 to 10 minutes or so. And then we'll pull up to a lek, we'll get out the binoculars, we'll count how many birds we see. Then we'll launch a drone. And for each particular lek on any given day, we fly basically 4 different flight patterns. So we fly what's on the left-hand side, a point of interest. The POI is a point of interest flight that we fly at 200 feet above ground level and 150 feet above ground level. And then once we complete those 2 circular flight patterns, we fly 2 linear patterns, and it's at the same height. It's at 200 feet and 150 feet. And all this is programmed to take place all in one flight. So these 4 different patterns all happen in one flight. So the drone launches, it goes up to 200, it flies a circular pattern around the lek, drops down, flies 150, goes back up, comes across the lek, which is the linear flight, which is a flight directly over the top of the lek with the camera pointed straight down. And then it drops down to 150 and comes back across. And all that, again, all that happens in one flight. And the difference between the camera angle and in a linear and a point of interest is, in a point of interest, the drone's just flying around, and as the pilot, I'm just keeping the camera locked in kind of on the center of the lek where most of the bird activity is. And so we can see all the birds in a point of interest. In a linear flight, we can't, just because of the field of view of the camera. So we fly those 4 different patterns and then land the drone. And then we'll do what is considered a manual count. So I basically watch the video and I just count all the black dots. We use a black hot. So anything that's got a warmer signature shows up as black. So it's just a bunch of black dots on the screen. So I basically count the birds, which are the black dots, and that's considered our manual count. And then we did an autonomous count where we took the video and we plugged it into the machine learning programs that we created. So we have pretty strict protocol. If even one bird flushes, it's considered an unsuccessful flight. So all the birds have to stay at the lek and not flush for us to have a successful mission, basically, which a successful flight includes the before count, flying all these 4 patterns and then landing safely. The after counts are something I'll go into a little bit later. So just to kind of show how a season would go, I'll just use this one particular lek. This lek's called SG11. This was a lek I flew in 2021. And basically what we attempted to do was we attempted to get 3 successful flights at each particular lek. So sometimes it could have taken 5 flights, sometimes it could have taken just 3 flights, and every time we showed up, we had a successful mission. In this particular instance, it took 5 different attempts to get the 3 successful flights. And I'll go into some of that here too. Again, if it's, if even one bird flushes, it's unsuccessful. So a successful mission, again, right there, it's completed the ground count, the flights, and then landing. And so between 2021 and 2022, we had 83 total attempts. 46 of those were successful and 37 of those were unsuccessful. So 55% success rate. Pretty good, I think. Challenging. So here's our first attempt. So these birds flushed. The green dot is the center of the lek. To the left on each one of these next few slides, I'll have the direction of the wind, and then I'll have the distance in both yards and meters I was from the lek when I launched the drone. So in this instance, we're 203 meters and pretty much right on launch, the birds flushed. So this was an unsuccessful attempt. So here's the second attempt with the wind kind of in my face. We're farther away. So we're 278 meters. So on this particular attempt, I was able to launch the drone and fly the 200-foot above ground level point of interest flight, which is the first pattern. So the first pattern is the 200 point of interest. The second is the 150. The third is the 200 linear, and the fourth is the 150 linear. So that's how they all unfold, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this was the first flight pattern. And again, I got all the way around and then the birds flushed. So this was considered unsuccessful. And here's the first successful attempt. I'm much farther away now, 448 meters. And so, that may have played a role in whether the birds flushed or not, the distance I was from the lek. So in this particular instance, you can see just based on the geographical information, the drone completed the 2 point of interest flights and then the 2 linear flights and then returned home. Looks like it got a little crazy on its return home. I can't quite remember what happened there, but and so here's the second successful attempt. And again, I'm even farther away this time, 514 meters. The wind's kind of from my left to right. And so this was another successful attempt, the 2 point of interest flights and then the 2 linear flights. And then here was my third attempt. And again, pretty far away, 461 meters. The wind was right in my face this time. So the reason I bring up the wind is because it's something to think about, how the wind carries the sound through the environment. Having wind in your face when you're flying might, potentially carry sound away from what you're attempting to fly over. So just something to think about. And then, proximity, how close you are to whatever species or whatever thing you're flying is something to consider too. So it took 5 attempts to get 3 successful flights on this particular lek. And this is basically what we're looking at. So those are all sage grouse down there. This manually counted video produced 36 sage grouse. And so, yeah, you can see it's just a bunch of black dots on a white background pretty much. And so the manual count, you just sit there at the computer and you kind of, start and stop the video, make sure you get all the birds in there and count as many as you can. So one of the challenging things with sage grouse, we have what we like to call this ballooning effect. So as the grouse move around and as they do their dance and they kind of expand and contract their bodies, they kind of blow up and then disappear just like a balloon, a balloon filled with air, and then you let all the air out and then the balloon's gone. And so that's one of the challenges with counting these birds. But that's the reason we use video, because if we used a still image, we potentially might not see all the birds in the still image. So we need some extended still images, which is a video, for us to count as many birds as possible. So this is I'm going to just show a quick little video of our graphical user interface that we created here. And I'll kind of describe stuff as we go. So we basically have access to all our videos. This is only 2021 information. And it kind of just gives us a rundown of how many flights, how much time we flew. We can go to each video and we can get counts through time in each video, basically by the frames. And we do this for every single video. This was a lot of work to build this actually. But we can run along the length of the video and see what the count was at certain points in time in the video, which is really cool. We can go look at the different leks and see what the different flights look like. This was not a successful flight. You can usually tell a successful from an unsuccessful. I don't know what happened here. I think the drone had a mind of its own probably. But we can look at each lek and look at each flight for each particular lek. And we can see what days those were and if we got all the data we wanted to on that particular day. And some of that's just based off the videos right there. If you have 4 videos, you got all the information you wanted to get. So this is the machine learning algorithm doing its thing. So on the left-hand side is the raw video, and on the right-hand side is basically a frame of the video. And then it'll give you kind of a count of how many birds the machine learning algorithm's picking up. And then we'll also be able to identify those birds. But here's what it looks like through time at different points in the video, the different counts. And then we can hit this little detect button and it kind of freezes things up and it'll just put a little box around all the birds it's detected. And so, yeah, if there were supposed to be 14 birds, it counted 13 of the birds. So that's pretty good. And so it's really cool. It was really challenging when you think about it, because here's another point in time in the video. So 17 is the birds that should be able to be detected. Oh, it found one more actually. So yeah, when you think about what we're trying to do, we're trying to count a moving wildlife species from a moving video from a moving platform. But basically this is set up to kind of drag and drop files. And it worked out pretty good, but there's just a lot of back-end work that our programmers had to do. So it's still not 100% user-friendly. It's a little bit of a grind to get all this put together, but once it's in there, it's really fun to kind of play around with this and use it. So just looking at these graphs, so the count type is on the x-axis there. So the max and average, the max count is the max from the autonomous count. So from the machine learning algorithm count, and the average, the AVG there, that's the average of the machine learning count. And then we have the manual count, which is me counting the black dots in the video, and then the ground count, which is just the binocular count. And then on the left side, the y-axis, that's the count, the number of birds. So the ground count did outperform all the other counts, the binocular count. But if we look at the standard deviation and you're thinking of a lek that has, 15 to 30 plus birds on it, plus or minus 3 birds isn't so bad. So they're not exactly the same, but they're pretty close. So it gives us hope that we could probably, once technology gets better and we refine our procedures, we could probably do a lot better. So it's exciting. So this was our first attempt back in 2018. This was, again, it's pretty clunky with the back end work that has to be done, but this is what's possible out there. And so in the left-hand corner is, it's finding these black dots, these grouse, and it's giving them a size based on the number of pixels per bird. And so what's cool about this is we actually did some tracking with this. So if you pay attention up into the right-hand corner, birds number 1, 11, and 5, they have a pretty good time up there once we get rolling here. So this is the machine learning algorithm detecting the birds. And then it's going to follow them too, which is really cool. So we kind of put together some tracking for this particular video. And you'll see once these 111 and 5 come into the frame, they start to, I think they have some kind of conflict going on up there. They don't really all like each other probably, but they start to chase each other around. The algorithm's still able to track the birds and find the birds. So it's just, this is again just really promising stuff. Really cool to see. And so here's another video where we actually tried to differentiate between males and females. Now, again, we're just looking at black dots, but based off pixel size, we made some assumptions that the smaller number of pixels might be females compared to the larger number of pixels. So we assigned some different colors. The blue would be what we suspect might be female birds, but just something cool to think about. Again, just with the possibilities. I just think it's really cool stuff to see that we're capable of doing this with the technology we have. It's pretty awesome. There's a lot of birds on this lek. We definitely didn't find them all, but it's cool to see the different kind of sizes, and you can see that on the left-hand side too. But really neat. We have lots of possibilities here. So this is kind of where we started back in 2017. And the reason I just want to show this is just so you can see, this obviously is not what we want to do, right? We don't want to be right on top of these birds, but it's just interesting to see how these birds respond to a drone. And so in this particular video, this is one drone actually recording another drone. So it's just a really neat video. Oh, yeah, I'll turn the sound off. There we go. But you can see the birds aren't fleeing for their lives, right? They maybe flush a little, they hop away a little, but they're not abandoning the lek. So we just thought this was kind of neat to show folks that, you know, we're not out there trying to harass wildlife. We're out there seeing how wildlife might respond to what we're doing. But this obviously we want to be as far away as possible. But that's just a good demonstration of, you know, every species responds differently, and it's good to have an idea of how whatever species you're studying would respond to drones. These are all the collaborators, and yeah, that's it. That's what I got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Did we have another presenter?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And there's, again, I'm keeping track of all the questions, but there's so many and we're pressed for time. So see,
Okay.
Ty is starting to answer them, but anything that he's not answering, I'm keeping track of.
Okay. Thank you. I will stop sharing here. Okay. All set.
Okay, can you folks see this?
Yep.
Gonna assume people can see this. So my name is Wesley Sarmento. I worked for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for 7 years as a grizzly bear management specialist on the Rocky Mountain front. And my goal with drones is a little different than other people's. I was specifically wanting to harass wildlife with drones as a conflict prevention tool to try to teach them to stay away from people, and also just to push them away from people when they're near people or livestock. So in Montana, grizzly bears are expanding out onto the prairie from the northern continental divide ecosystem, where their original recovery area was. And now we're having regular observations of grizzly bears over 150 kilometers from the recovery zone every year. And with that, there's been a lot of complaints about grizzly bears. People are really upset that bears are moving into this agriculturally dominated landscape. Grizzly bears can kill livestock, they can cause property damage, they can injure and kill people, and so there's a lot of human safety concerns. So when I started in 2017 as a grizzly bear manager based specifically on the prairie to deal with these expanding grizzly bears, I held dozens of public meetings to solicit feedback from local communities to see what they wanted in grizzly bear management. And resoundingly, people all really wanted human safety and property protection. They didn't want bears coming near homes, and they wanted bears to fear people, which were all reasonable concerns. So based on that public input, I started a hazing program specifically to immediately move bears away from unacceptable places like towns and people's yards and near livestock, and to try to aversive condition bears to avoid people long term. I wanted to teach bears that people were dangerous, to stay away from people, and also stay away from towns and homes. And then I wanted to evaluate the efficacy of new and old hazing tools. So some details of the study. I defined immediate success of a hazing event as a bear that fled over 200 meters away. I chose that threshold because the National Park Service has a 100-yard distance to bears rule. So they've determined that 100 yards a person can be away from a bear, and that's safe. So I just doubled that because people want bears to be further away out here. And then I defined long-term aversive conditioning success as bears requiring less hazing over longer time periods. So over a calendar year, and then also across years. Then I defined the ability to pursue a bear during a hazing event is that we could chase bears for at least 10 minutes unimpeded. And we recorded where bears were before the hazing event occurred and then after the hazing event occurred. And we also recorded their behavior. So we tested 4 different tools: the classic shotgun with non-lethal deterrents like cracker shells and rubber bullets. And then I purchased some Airedale dogs. I specifically got this breed because local producers in the area favor this breed, and conservation outcomes are known to garner better support when local perspectives are kept in mind. And then also just driving at bears, honking the horn, and then using an Autul Evo 2 drone that had thermal capabilities. And that drone could do about 30 minutes of flight and fly about 1 kilometer. We weren't able to completely randomize what tool we're using for safety considerations. For example, I couldn't shoot shotguns in town or when the fire danger was too high, and I couldn't use the dogs near highways. So here's a breakdown of the hazing events that we did. We did 163. Most were on adults, and then a few were, we had about half of that on subadults and a number on yearlings. 40 on males, 61 on females, and 62 bears we didn't know the sex of. There were 55 bears that we could identify, and then 108 that were unidentifiable. We had a total of 18 unsuccessful hazing events and 145 successful hazing events. And I will note that we always got landowner permission when we did a hazing event. One of the recent popular press articles kind of alluded to that you don't need permission to use drones on private property, but we always got permission from landowners before we did any kind of hazing event. So bears were significantly more likely to display fearful behaviors after the hazing event occurred compared to before. So in the blue or on the left are before hazing event behaviors. And you can see the majority of them are bears are foraging or walking or bedded. While after a hazing event occurred, most of the bears are running away, which is what we wanted to see. And also bears did flee further away from human areas after hazing events relative to before. So the plot on the left is distance to roads in meters, and before hazing event is in the turquoise, and then after hazing event is in the salmon pink color. And then the plot on the right is distance to human development. And you can see that bears are further away after hazing relative to before. So it did appear that hazing was effective in pushing bears further away from people. We also saw significantly less hazing events as the year went on, which suggests that aversive conditioning was occurring because most of the hazing was happening in the early spring, and then bears appeared to learn to stay away from people, and so we needed to haze bears less throughout the calendar year. Although we can't completely rule out other biological drivers of this pattern. For example, during May and June is the bear breeding season, and so they're just more active during that period. And also, youngsters are getting kicked off their mothers at that point in time, and so they're a lot more active during that time. But there is some evidence to suggest that they are being aversively conditioned long term, because we would have expected a significant increase in the amount of hazing events during the fall hyperphagia period. So before bears go den for the winter, they have to put on a lot of fat, and that's typically when we see a lot of conflicts and complaints about bears. And with the hazing events, we didn't see that spike in the fall season. Also, younger bears needed significantly more hazing, which suggests that older bears are learning to stay away from people and to fear people. So here's the factors that influenced immediate hazing event success. Again, that is defined as a bear moving at least 200 meters away from where it started. So just going down from the top, yearling and subadults, the age of the bear was included in the top model. So subadults did need a little bit more hazing compared to yearlings, and I think that was because yearlings are basically super naive bears, and they kind of don't know to stay away from people as much as the subadults do. And so they just took a lot more hazing events relative to subadults and adults. So subadults were more successful in their hazing relative to adults even. And that's probably because the subadults are just not as dominant of an animal, and so they're already just kind of programmed to run away from things, while some of the bigger boars in particular can kind of stand their ground. The number of bears was also retained in the model as an important factor explaining hazing success. When you have more bears in a group, it's actually more successful in the hazing event. And then we have the type of hazing event that occurred. Projectiles, they overlapped with truck, which is set as the baseline. Also, adults are set as the baseline as this model, so everything's relative to those two factors. And then drones did have the highest estimated success, although those confidence intervals do overlap with the truck and projectiles. Basically, because the sample size is so low, we have these giant confidence intervals. If we were to able to get 5 times as many samples, those confidence intervals would shrink a lot. But the drones did significantly outperform the dogs as hazing success. Dogs actually had a lower predicted success of hazing bears. So they had an 85% reduction in the odds of successful hazing event. And so that begs the question, why were my dogs not very effective at hazing bears on the prairie? For one reason, we could see the bears from a really long distances away. So I could see a bear 300-400 meters away. The dogs just can't detect bears from that far. And so oftentimes they didn't know where to go. And then they just started to search the area, and then they got into whatever animal they found first, basically. And so both my dogs have gotten into at least 6 porcupines. And once they get into a porcupine, work is done for the day, because you got to go to the veterinarian office to get them taken care of. I will note that hazing dogs are a lot different than guardian dogs, which are effective at deterring bears from homes. And so we did another study looking at these bigger Boz and Kangal dogs and how effective they were at keeping bears away from homes. And we saw a significant decrease in the number of bear GPS locations near homes after dogs were placed at these places, at these farms. And the ability to pursue bears for 10 minutes increased 127 times with the drone compared to with the truck. And basically that's because with the truck or other hazing methods, you're constantly stopped by fences, canals, planted fields that you can't drive through to chase bears away. You can really just go anywhere with the drone. And so you're not as impeded as you are with other. And also with the drone, you can really precisely move the animals where you want them. And that's really not the case with especially the dogs. They kind of just chase the bears wherever. And even with the shotgun, it kind of just disperses bears just in errant directions. And so the accuracy is really high, and also the safety is really high. I did this all from the safety of the back of my truck, so I didn't have to expose myself to bears. So in conclusion, all these hazing methods are effective at moving bears away from unacceptable places. The drones were extremely safe. They were the most successful tool, and they were highly precise. The data do suggest that aversive conditioning may be occurring over longer timescales, but this study is limited by the fact that we weren't able to randomize what tool we were using. The scale that we were using, since we were only working on the prairie, these results might not be transferable to a more forested environment where the drone might not work as well because the bears can go into cover. Also, the dogs that I used, I specifically used those dogs. They had been trained on feral hogs, and I got them as adults. And so it could be that it was just my dogs, other dogs could work better. And then, of course, our sample size limited the conclusions of the study. With that, I want to thank a whole bunch of people, specifically my technicians, Jack Austin, Sarah Zilke, and Aaron Finger, and then a whole bunch of people at Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the grizzly bear research team, all the local people that helped with proactive work, USDA Wildlife Services, and then a number of funders. And that's it.
All right, thank you. We actually finished right on time, but I did have one. Like I said, I've been keeping track of all the questions. We've had a lot, and they're really good questions. So there's absolutely no way that we would have time to get to them all. There was one though that came up twice, and I'm curious about it myself too because I do a lot of work for airports, and they need to haze animals to get them off the airport for hazard reasons and stuff. And there is like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act that's in place. You have to get a depredation permit to counteract that and stuff. And somebody asked a couple times in here, the Airborne Hunting Act, it does, obviously you can't shoot from aircraft, but it also includes harassment. So is there something is there a certain permit you have, or is there some sort of rule that allows you to bypass that when it comes to the hazing?
Yeah, so state agencies are allowed to issue permits to allow hazing. In Montana with elk, prior to drones, we would issue permits for people to harass elk from the ground, or some of the ranchers have their own aircraft or contract or know someone who has a plane, and they can get permits through Fish, Wildlife, and Parks enforcement to harass and haze elk, and drones are just included in that aircraft category. So, however, whoever's doing the flying of the drones would need to be Part 107 certified because it is part of a commercial operation. That I don't know how many folks actually realize that, though. The folks are out there just buy drones and go see what they can do with it. So
Yeah.
And then for the grizzly bear specific, since they are endangered species, we get a specific permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for hazing.
I know Washington State was very interested in the hazing of hazing of elk herds with drones as well for the same reason. A lot of those large herds of elk that the public want to see, they descend upon private agricultural fields and can cause some significant economic losses. So it's been a kind of a long-term thing, and I think drones are just another tool that could be useful for, and maybe potentially even the drones in a box at some point, have it be more automated instead of having to have people stay up all night and chase elk out of their fields. So,
All right. Well, like I said, I have all if your question wasn't answered, I do have them all noted. I tried to do my best to guess who the question was directed toward based on when it was asked. So, in addition to this presentation being available, and I think she said it's going to be another couple weeks before it gets edited and everything. But in addition to that, there will be, I don't know if it's going to be everybody doing a recording of them answering their questions, or if we'll um, just have it done uh, through an email or something. We will get all the questions answered. So I appreciate it, everybody. And I hope everybody has a happy holiday and stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.